Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, Vietnam!
I love the smell of napalm in the morning.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
I feel the need for speed.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Snakes. Why'd it have to be snakes?
I'm Spartacus!
I'm Batman.
Hello and welcome to the Moviescramble podcast. Since there are very few cinema releases and the fact that it's about 300 miles that you would need to travel in order to see Wonder Woman this week, we are not reviewing any new cinema releases. What we're doing today is we are continuing our Hitchathon, which I've decided to start calling it. Basically, we are taking two Alfred Hitchcock films that have elements in common and discussing them. They're usually from different phases of his career, and it gives us an opportunity to dive into the Hitchcock box sets that we all have and love. Now, today I am joined by both of my colleagues, which is absolutely fantastic, really, really good. First up is Thomas Simpson, who is putting us all to shame at the moment by the fact that he is a published author again. Yay. Just last week, his second novel, Blackened, was released. You can get it on Amazon. It is available on paperback and it's available on Kindle. And he hasn't actually paid me to say this at all, which is really good. Mr. Simpson, published author, how the hell are you?
I'm very good, John. Thank you. That was what an intro. How did I really follow that up? I'm glad we're calling it the Hitchathon and not the Cockathon.
Totally different audience would be aiming out there.
But yeah, I'm good. It's good to be back. It's been a long time since I've did a movie podcast with you guys, and I'm looking forward to it. Although I feel like a total fraud because this seems like a very highbrow Hitchcock podcast, you know, and I'm kind of like, man, I'm in my depth here, which is interesting. I've had this box set we're speaking about for 13 years, and it's only been this year I've really started watching it.
Also on the podcast is the third member of the team who this week displayed some magnificent thespian skills, which have had her described in Variety as the Brando for this generation, where Mary Palmer played Bruce Willis playing John McClane in Die Hard, vest and all, in a darkened room. If you don't believe me, please go online and find it because it is out there. Mary, how the hell are you?
I have slightly more hair than Bruce Willis, so that was an issue. But it was, well, we had our Christmas party in work this week, and what can you do over Zoom? So I decided to don my vest, steal one of Chris's lighters, and crawl along my hallway to make it look like the air vent in Nakatomi Plaza. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a published author. I feel like a fraud, actually, because you guys are obviously, I mean, John, you read The Guardian and such highbrow publications, and Simmy, you write your own stuff. And who am I? I'm just a guy in a vest trying to rescue some Christmas party goers.
Well, not strictly true, obviously, because you're a published journalist.
Yeah, many moons ago, yes.
Yes, so yeah, seek Mary out online. It was the Film Stories magazine, I believe.
Yeah, it was actually. Yeah, so I wrote an article on cinema and mental health, actually, because that's something that's very important to me. But yeah, I forgot about that, John. Thanks for reminding me that I did do some good in my 31 years in this earth.
Yeah, well, I've been here longer and I've done less than both of you, so I'm quite happy with that as well. I'm not putting myself down in any way.
If you are going to seek Mary online, please remember to use incognito.
Today we are talking about Hitchcock films, and the first of them is the 1942 film Saboteur.
I'm Barry Kane, American. Right now I'm a fugitive. A couple of days ago I was an aircraft worker. Then something happened. My best friend died in that fire. The authorities questioned everybody. I told them what I knew. You don't know what it is to be hunted like an animal. To dread every door you open. To fear everybody. Even the one girl you could love.
Even if a man committed murder to defend himself, maybe I wouldn't tell the police. But there's only one reason why a man commits sabotage. That's worse than murder.
The film stars Robert Cummings, Priscilla Lane, Otto Kruger and Norman Lloyd in a very early outing for him. He has gone on to become a particularly well-known face on film and television. The film itself starts at an aircraft factory in Glendale, California, where an act of sabotage has been carried out. The main suspect is a man called Barry Kane, who is accused of starting the fire and also killing his best friend. Now, in order for him to prove his innocence, he tries to track down the man he believes is the real culprit, a man called Fry, who he met at the aircraft factory during a break in work. And he follows some clues that he found, primarily an envelope that was addressed to him, and he starts travelling across the country to try and track down the man and get to the bottom of the plot to basically stop the American war effort. Now, this was one of Hitchcock's first forays into American cinema. It was just after America had entered the Second World War, so it was particularly relevant, although the pre-production actually started before. They started getting involved after Pearl Harbor, but I believe the film is due to start round about the same time as Pearl Harbor actually happened, and obviously the war was in everybody's minds for a good few years before that, even in the likes of America. So it seemed very prescient at the time. It was reasonably well received from what I can see, and there's obviously a lot to take in about this story. So, Thomas, what were your initial thoughts on the film?
I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was one of his best ones, and I did enjoy it. But it was a film for me that the longer it went on and the more complex the shadowy plot got, the more it kind of lost me at times. And I felt it, even though it was quite a short film, it was about an hour and 40 minutes, I think it was, I felt it kind of dragged a little towards the end. But I did like the ending. I thought it was quite thrilling, although very dated, obviously, very special effects in that. But overall, I did enjoy it. It gave me really strong North by Northwest vibes. I found it was a very similar film and plot and pacing and just all kind of setup of it, really. But yeah, I did enjoy it. I thought the actors were good. I don't think Hitchcock himself was particularly happy with the two leads. He's commented that he didn't think they were really right for the parts, but yeah, I enjoyed them. They were likeable for a good chemistry.
Mary, being a resident Hitchcock aficionado or expert or whatever, what did you take from it? Obviously, you have seen this film a number of times, so what did you think of the film?
Yeah, do you know, on watching it this time, Simmy, you're right. I think he wanted Gary Cooper for the lead. I don't think he was particularly impressed with the kind of the two leads in general, although I actually quite like their chemistry together. I think there's some moments of kind of light comedy throughout all of this actually as well. I do like this movie, you know, the way it starts and there's that kind of black plume of smoke that works its way across the screen, and it's almost like they're trying to, you know, use a visual metaphor for fascism spreading throughout Europe, and it's kind of, it's not war propaganda, but it's quite explicit, and it's, you know, you do your duty for your country, these are the bad guys, although they're not officially named in any capacity or any political affiliations. And there's a lot of allegory throughout, you know, when the two leads meet up with the circus troupe, and that's clearly designed to be, you know, represent the other, or people who are sort of on the fringes of society. And yeah, huge North by Northwest vibes. You know, Barry Kane is the wrong man. They're in pursuit of the wrong man. And obviously, not to give spoilers away, but yeah, the ending is very, very similar to a particular scene in North by Northwest as well. And I think that Otto Kruger is excellent. You know, he starts off as this, you're like, oh, it's a wee grandpa playing with his wee grandchild next to this. And actually, you know, there's so much in this movie where it's, the person is not who you think they are, and I do really like it. I think it's a wee bit cheesy and on the nose at times because, you know, it's, as you say, it came out in 1942, and I do feel like there are some sort of, you know, we're the Americans, we're the good guys, but I kind of love all that sort of, you know, the policemen have their trousers up to here and they all talk about dames and broads and they've got the trilbies at the nice angle, and I do quite like that element of it as well.
Yeah, it is very much, as you say, a kind of film of its time, and it's became sort of cliched now, the style of it. But I suppose you can look at it in a kind of way of hindsight. It does seem a bit more kind of amusing than it shouldn't be, but not in a bad way, not in a mocking kind of way. It's got a charm to it.
You say the Americans are the good guys in it, but they're all Americans in it. There is no one particular character who has a dodgy foreign accent in any way or acts as if they're Eastern European. They're all quite charming and polite in their own way. All these American characters. The main female character who supports the bad guys' organization. She's sort of matronly almost, So it's not quite as cut and dried.
Yeah, no, and I get that, but I feel like they use costume to a certain extent to allude to these kind of the bad guys in inverted commas, because you've got like the character of Friedman who walks about in a long black leather coat with the pencil thin mustache. Like, tell me that's not an allusion to, Germany at the time. So I think they might not, they don't have the dodgy accents and stuff like that, but I feel like they use other elements such as costuming to kind of set that up. And that's why it's so obvious when, as I say, they go into the circus troupe vans and you're like, okay, these are clearly people who are on the fringes, or they're maybe not as well off and whatever. And I feel like that's the kind of dynamic they use to sort of set that up instead. Like, I must admit, every time Freeman appears, it does make me giggle, because it's literally like the most ridiculous mustache and the long leather coat. And I'm like, okay, we get it.
Well, you probably know this, but in the original script, the bad guys were supposed to be Germans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hitchcock wanted to make it more vague, and I do like that you mentioned taking a mustache and that. But Otto Kruger, the only thing he's missing is literally twirling his mustache as he speaks, and it's good. But it's like, again, it's that kind of dated aspect where you've got these actors in it, and they're all like Broadway actors, so they're used to acting a certain theatre way, which does stick out like a sore thumb now when you watch his films back, because you become so conditioned to how movie actors act.
Mm-hmm. It's a bit more melodramatic. It's more over the top.
That they're acting to the audience, not the camera, in a way. But I like that. I like that style of acting. It's just, like I say, you get conditioned to a certain way. It can be jarring at first, but it works specifically well when it comes to bad guys. When villains do it, I love it. I'm totally invested in that.
What did you think of the whole sort of road trip aspect of the film? Because as I mentioned at the top, the main character Barry, goes pretty much all over the country in search of the origins of this organization, and obviously trying to clear his name. So he seems to, it's almost like, well, in a way, it's very like the 39 Steps with the main character in that, in handcuffs for part of it, being chased across the country. So there's obviously elements of earlier Hitchcock in there as well, which is obviously something he was always quite happy about doing, and we will no doubt come to that again when we're talking about our next film later on. But do you think that kind of element worked? I have a theory about that element anyway. That's obviously, it's to show off the breadth of America and how varied and different it is, and how many different types of good guys, because if you think about it, he meets up with the kindly blind man who
I love the setup for that. I love the setup for that. And of course he's in handcuffs, and this blind guy's so astute and can pick up everything else, and when he's trying to stop them from clinking, I love the whole setup of that.
There was obviously that. There was obviously the truck driver, down to earth, salt of the earth American, just goes out, gets it done, happy with his lot. But if he manages to see an accident or something happen on the road, he gets all excited because it might be something to break up his day. And then obviously, as you mentioned, the circus troupe, which are normally regarded as freaks and outcasts, but here they're regarded as patriots because they help the downtrodden, because Barry and at that point his soon-to-be girlfriend, which we'll touch on in a few minutes' time, because that was a bit of a jarring plot point, that seemed to sort of shout out to you, we are America. And it was all sort of ordinary people. Well, there was abnormal, unordinary people, as obviously within the circus environment, but it was like the ordinary Joe, the sort of the down-to-earth intellectual who believes in the Constitution, but he's quite happy to break it if it's for the good of Americans and all this sort of stuff. So what did you think about all that?
So I also thought that they used those pictures as well to display conflicting opinions of America and America entering the war. So you obviously have some characters who are, okay, we'll help Barry and Pat, and we'll hide them, whatever, and we'll do whatever we can. And you have others who are only too willing to hand them over and very much believe in authority and the police and a hierarchy in that way. So as much as I thought, they were used to show off, as you say, this kind of Americana, this kind of almost clumsy, take a look at these working class people type of thing, I also thought they were used to actually demonstrate the differing opinions, because you have to remember, you know, there was so many fascist societies for real in America at that time who were very much in support of leaving the Europeans to it and actually providing support and help to Germany, because they thought, you know, Russia was the bigger threat. So I thought they kind of used these peripheral characters to display those different opinions that were actually going on in real time at the time.
True. Obviously, one of the big things with Hitchcock films is his sense of style, his on-screen presence. Now, you get that at the start with some very dramatic opening credits, which are reasonably simply done. It's just use of light and shadow. That's all it is. And then, obviously, when there's the scene where the fire starts in the factory, and that's very dramatic because it billows in from the side. What did you think of the way that Hitchcock sort of stamped his authority on the film in terms of the visuals? Thomas?
I really liked it. I thought the opening was quite shocking in a way. I thought that, as you were mentioning it earlier, Mary, the way the black smoke came in was very dramatically done. And you had the fire. It was just, I'm like, right, what's happening here? Because I wanted the film fairly cold, and the guy runs towards a fire with the extinguisher and then just seems to die really quickly. And I was like, what happened there? I was just quite shocked by it. The visually, especially, obviously the effects have dated to an extent, and it's in black and white. There's a lot of things. It's very much of its time, but I thought it still held up in its own way. I thought it was visually very impressive.
Yeah, he had a certain sort of kinetic energy about him in a lot of his early films, so it was quite a pacey film, which obviously tried to reinforce the theme of pursuit and everything, I thought, as well, because they wanted to keep it going. As you say, it's a reasonably quick film. It's an hour and 40 minutes. It doesn't really hang about. It goes from one scene to another, and it's always following Barry as he is basically running. He's always on the run as well. There was a couple of really nice touches as well with Priscilla Lane's character, because she is a model in it. There was a couple of big billboards that they went past, and they were quite present for the actual story itself, saying like, "You are being followed" and things like that, which I thought was pretty good. This is going to be a difficult film to not spoil, so I think we might as well spoil some elements of it, especially to do with the last act. Now, the grand finale of it takes place at a national monument, which ties in quite nicely with North by Northwest. Yeah. But there was slight differences in this one, in that for the whole of that scene, there was absolutely no music at all. All you could hear was the foghorns from passing ferry boats, and even they were in the background, so you could actually hear the breath of people when they were struggling and things like that. Do you think that worked, Mary?
Oh yeah, I mean, I know the special effects have dated, but I don't think the effect of the scene has dated. Like, every time I watch this, I'm like, because you can hear their foot slipping. Like, though they obviously end up on this, you know, quite famous landmark, and they're struggling for grip, and obviously they're in these ridiculous, you know, 1940s brogues, so not exactly like climbing shoes, and you can literally hear their foot sliding off the side. And as you say, you can hear their breath, and obviously there's a moment where you can actually start to hear like fabric rip, and you can see the thread coming undone. I really think that scene holds up from a tension perspective, maybe not the special effects, but yeah, to this day, even still watching it, I'm like, oh, this makes me feel really nauseous, because you can hear everything, and I think the lack of music is actually the best idea for that particular scene.
I 100% agree. That scene is very, very well done, intense, and it's not a long scene either, but it drags out the right amount of time to keep you hooked, but doesn't rip the arse from it to the point you're like, right, do it or don't. It's really effective. And I didn't even notice there was a lack of music until you mentioned it. It definitely added to it.
Yeah, there was a documentary on the DVD, and it went into a wee bit of explanation about the final scene and some of the choices that were made. They were speaking to Norman Lloyd about it, and he was asked, he was obviously quite a young actor at the time, and he wasn't particularly well known in terms of film acting, so having this almost anonymous bad guy that he was chasing meant there was a sort of heightened tension, because you didn't really know what was going to happen, because if it was somebody well known, then you'd expect something. It was like, for instance, if it was like somebody like Peter Lorre who was playing the bad guy, then you get certain expectations based on his previous film career. So you don't have that with Norman Lloyd. And Hitchcock said to him, obviously, we're going to do this scene on top, right up in the torch. So we're, it's going to be done up there. Can you do a backflip? And he said, yep, not a problem. And he says, I've never done a backflip before, but, I was young, it'd be okay. And they went on to explain how then obviously they cut that, and there was a stuntman that actually fell from it. They actually recreated the whole torch part.
Yeah, they rebuilt it,
Yeah. Built it to scale, and this stuntman did that in one take, actually, like falling down and grabbing in the crook between the finger and the thumb. And what they did for Norman Lloyd characters actually falling, which you see him all the way falling, it was the reverse angle. The camera actually shot up to the ceiling, and he said, and there was me doing some balletic moves to to pretend. So yeah, it's quite innovative for its time, and like you say, yes, it doesn't totally stand up now because we have seen better use of CG. We've seen far worse use of effects as well. But yeah, I thought it stood up particularly well, and I did like the fact that there was a choice not to have the that sort of stuff at the end. I sort of avoid all that, which you see in numerous films around about the time. They tend to go big because it's the finale, so everything rises, everything gets bigger, and it's supposed to sweep up the audience. But this way, the audience are actually they're almost leaning in.
Absolutely.
Because what's going on, they're having to work out what's happening. They're not being told, they're not being telegraphed anymore, which is it's good because it has a bit of faith in your audience. There's an assumption there that you are following the film and you're understanding what's going on, so you know what the stakes are. So therefore, you don't need any outside influences to tell you what the final stakes are. Now, obviously, this was the first use of a national monument, which you went back to again later on, which I am sure we will get to at some point, but we're not going to obviously discuss that today. So obviously, we've gone through the various elements of it, the people, the fact that people in high society have dinner parties and yet are all really rotten people to begin with. Anyway, what were your overall thoughts, Mary? Would you recommend this movie to our listener out there, or is that where would you regard it in terms of Hitchcock's oeuvre?
Do you know, it's not his best, and I think, like, when we were talking last time, you hold up Marnie against Vertigo, Marnie is always going to come off as the film that's not as good. I don't want to say the worst film because that's not fair. And I think when you look at this against the film we're going to talk about next, yeah, this is dated and it seems a bit cheesy, but actually, as an example of, kind of audacious technical effects and keeping you on your toes, because nothing and no one in this movie is necessarily what they appear to be. And I think that's what's quite interesting as well. I don't know the leads particularly well. And as you said, John, there's no obvious signposting of this man always plays a villain, so watch out, or this man is always the hero, so let's follow his journey. And I do think it kind of keeps you on your toes. I think, don't get me wrong, part of it does feel like, a wee bit kind of American or Ally propaganda, which kind of rubs me up the wrong way, because I always thought Hitchcock was kind of above that sort of thing. But actually, as a movie, yeah, it's enjoyable. Is it his best? No, but I'd still encourage you to watch it because I just love Hitchcock movies. It's well set up, it's well paced, and the finale, as I say, you can. It's making me feel sick just thinking about it. You can hear like feet scraping and hands. You can literally hear palms clasping together. I think as it works towards its finale, it definitely gets better. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed watching it again.
Yes, I thought that you were going to say it rubbed you up the wrong way because of your Nazi sympathies, but obviously not.
But did you see the angle that Otto Kruger wore his hat at, though? It was like charming.
Yes, I did a certain amount of style, didn't he, obviously?
Yeah.
Thomas, what did you think?
Yeah, I enjoyed it overall. I did think it kind of dipped in the middle for me a little, and as the conspiracy and the plot kind of unfurled, I was like, right, it's kind of a bit too... I get it's this big complex plot, but it didn't have to, for me, come across like that. It almost started telling me, here's this big complex plot. It was almost Bond villain-esque in a way.
Yeah.
But without the self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't really work for me as much, but it redeemed itself at the end. I thought the climax was excellent. as you're saying, Mary, as well, there's a lot of things in this film that aren't what they seem, and that's a theme for the whole movie. And even regarding like Robert Cummins as Barry Kane, Robert Cummins was known more for comedy roles, and that's why the things Hitchcock went and said. They said it before, it was fine in the movie, but there was something too comical about his expressions in that. And I get that, but I don't think it was a bad thing, because again, it worked for the film because it's somebody else that there's something deceptive about him, but that's the point.
Yeah.
The point of the whole film, isn't it? I did find it a little, I don't know if twee is the right word, but the fact is he's going across America. Everybody was just really nice for the most part and want to help him and believe his innocence. I'm like, come on, it's not one person's thinking, maybe it's dodgy. Well, I know people did eventually, but it seemed for a long while everybody was quite happy just to take this young stranger in.
Yeah, well, you got that as well with the bad guys, because at one point they obviously took him in because they thought he was Fry now, without even like requiring a code word or anything. He just said, "Who are you?" And they said, "Well, you know, that aircraft factory."
The scene when Patricia's trying to flag the car down, and it drives up to her and drags her out of the car, and she's screaming, "Help me, help me!" And this old couple just like, kids, what they like to do. I'm like, a woman is being kidnapped.
I must admit, the one scene with Patricia and it's still great to me to this day. Like, she's meant to be like, obviously, you know, and being sort of held captive or whatever, but she's in the night dress, she's got the heels on, the hair's still done, and she just pulls out her lippy and writes a polite wee like, "Oh, help me," floats it off out the window.
Incredibly immaculate as her handwriting.
I know, with lipstick of all things. I know, but that's the one part of the film that kind of sticks in my throat a bit. You know, she's being held captive, she's stressed, she's maybe worried about her life and this guy that she's sort of taken up with. But no, the victory roles are still perfect. She's still got the night dress on and she just writes this polite little message in lipstick. And as you say, in perfect handwriting, and just floats it gently out the window.
Do you know the bit that really got me about that scene? I don't know why. It's attention to detail, but not only does a guy go and get her a milkshake, but he makes her pay for it.
That's the fascists for you.
The least he could do is just like buy it for her.
But he brought it back with a napkin, so that was nice.
It was the most like a highbrow kidnapper I've seen.
Yeah. Overall, I enjoyed the film. I'd never seen it before. It was the first time that I'd watched it. Even though, like Thomas, I had the box set for a number of years, probably over a decade, quite like yourself. I did enjoy it. The one element of it I didn't particularly like was the fact that they seemed to use bits of paper in order to progress the plot along, because you had the envelope with Fry's name and address on it, which you just happened to drop. Then you had the telegram that the baby gave him, and that, like you say, then there's the written stuff. The only one that wasn't written down was when he was sitting in the car in New York with the two bad guys, and and the guy in front says, "Hey boss, do you need me for the Brooklyn job tomorrow?" You know.
Not the brightest, yeah.
Yeah, so the whole kind of plot was telegraphed in that way. He didn't really need to find anything out. He just needed to be in the right place at the right time in order to read something or hear something. So that kind of, it wasn't great that way, but I enjoyed it in terms of the spectacle of it, the final act. Some of the acting, I did enjoy the main performance as well, and showing off different types of people, and the way that the main female lead went from "I'm going to report you to the cops" to "Oh my, you're so handsome," you know, in the space of about 10 minutes. You know, when she only believed him when the bad guys said that he didn't do it, and there was a sudden realization in her face. What do you mean? He's innocent. He's not. You know, and he'd only been telling her that for about an hour at that point. So
again, there is that kind of dated thing, isn't there, with the way women are treated in the film? And I mean, you could do an entire podcast and that when it comes to Hitchcock, let's be honest. But it's even the scene of the boat in the dance when he dances with the random woman, and she's just so overly like.
Thank you for dancing with me. Yeah.
Oh, I hope we dance again. I'm like, I won't even see you again in this movie. But a lot seems to be put on the fact.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, as he gently puts her down in a chair afterwards, like just discarded, like, done with you, next. And part of me wonders how much of that is Hitchcock and how much of that is like forced studio, because you know, because the thing is, romance movies, you know, or like even within spy thrillers, like the romance element would always sell, and I just wonder how much of that is studio and how much of that is just like Hitchcock think that's how women are. I don't know.
You get an impression Hitchcock was kind of like, women will be like, about tell them to be like.
Yeah.
So overall, we seem to enjoy the film, which is obviously good. It's by no means a bad film, which I think you can pretty much say the same for most Hitchcock films. So
Could you say one more thing before we?
Of course you can. Yes, don't go. Yeah.
We mentioned like North by Northwest, and I think North by Northwest is a much better movie. And in many ways, it's almost like a trial run for it. Like, I don't know if North by Northwest would have been as good if it wasn't for this film. He managed to get that more right, and I think it's because he learned from this.
Yeah, he did use elements again. Like I said, he used elements again and again, and he usually got better at them. He used them in different ways, and he improved on them. Definitely did. There are a number of things that he did in terms of like scene setting, using theatres, for instance. They seem to feature quite a lot in his films, using monuments, using spectacle. You're right. You're totally right on that. Yeah. Okay. Right. So, following on from Saboteur. So, following on from our discussion of Saboteur, we turn our attention to the second of the Hitchcock films for today, which is the 1966 film Torn Curtain.
Paul Newman and Julie Andrews find love in danger and danger in love when they venture behind Alfred Hitchcock's Torn Curtain.
Now you stay away from me. Don't talk to me. When this plane lands, you take the next one out. Anywhere. Go home.
But she had to know what was happening to the man she loved.
All right, what would you like me to do?
I'll be back in time for the wedding.
In 2 months?
Yeah.
Or 3?
Yeah.
Oh, Michael, you certainly know how to make a girl feel wanted.
The film stars Paul Newman and Julie Andrews in a political thriller which sees an American scientist attending a conference in Copenhagen, as they tend to call it actually in the film, and then expressing his desire to defect to East Germany in order to work on their rocket program, the Gamma 5 program. Now, this film was a change in direction for Hitchcock in a number of ways. The film was the first that he did without long-term collaborators Robert Burks, the cinematographer, editor George Tomasini, and quite famously, it was the first film that he did not use Bernard Herrmann's score for. Herrmann started a score for it and was fired during production. So there were an awful lot of changes with this film, and I think I would like to find out what you guys thought of this in terms of, did these changes actually affect the film? So Mary, what were your initial thoughts on the Cold War thriller Torn Curtain?
So I don't know how, because I've watched this box set a million times, I've never seen Torn Curtain, and can I just say I'm now obsessed with it, like utterly obsessed. Like, it's a proper old-fashioned, furtive glances across a room, men chasing each other in corridors. It's a proper spy thriller. And like Saboteur, the war that it's dealing with is actually happening at that time. I thought I'm in love with Paul Newman, but Paul Newman was just excellent. And that there's he's not sort of playing this sort of charismatic sort of pretty boy. He does genuinely seem under pressure and stressed and tense. And I loved it. Do you miss did I miss the particular changes that have been made? I think the music's a big one, but actually in terms of the way the film is paced, no, I don't think I missed anything. And the cinematography at times is absolutely lush. I'm not sure how much we're going to talk about, because this is a really hard film to talk about without spoiling it. But all I will say is that the tension throughout was definitely sustained, and there were so many moments where I actually just kind of held my breath. And for the last 15 minutes in particular, I don't think I exhaled once. I loved this movie, loved it.
Thomas?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this as well. I hadn't seen it before until the other day, and I watched this before Saboteur, and it was interesting because I watched this and I really enjoyed it. I was watching Saboteur, the first half hour anyway, I was thinking, Torn Curtain as a better film, I'm probably enjoying this more. But as I finished both films, let them digest, this was a superior film for me in many ways. You mentioned Paul Newman, he is excellent in this film. So is Julie Andrews, everybody is, to be fair. But I just love Paul Newman's character and the way he plays it. And he's not this overtly tough, masculine, macho style character, and he shouldn't be either because he's a fucking scientist. It's like everything I think in this film's so underplayed in a way. Even the chase scene at the end isn't this big cinematic, action-packed finale. It's just this really underlying tension that grips you, and I just think it's so cleverly done.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say bits without spoiling it, but there is really dramatic scenes in it that, again, aren't over the top because I can't even mention it if it's spoiling it. I can't even think of another way to mention it.
Just go ahead and mention it because it's a film that was made 4 or 5 decades ago. So yeah, I think we'll be all right.
It's when the scientist realizes he's at it. And he's like, "You're going to stay here while I phone the authorities," and he just doesn't. He just leaves the room, and you're like, "Well, of course you went. This guy overwhelming." He just leaves the room, and I thought, yeah, it kind of makes sense in a way. But just even with things like that, the fact that the scientist isn't like attacking them and trying to like restrain them was this big fight. Everything's just so underplayed, and it's great for it. And I think it really adds to the tension in a way that it wouldn't be if it was this action spy thriller.
Yeah, but at the same time, to me, I think it is. Like, I mean, there's some really beautiful framing. There's a scene where the character of Michael and Sarah first arrive at the Hotel Berlin, and Julie Andrews is at the far left of the screen just looking out the window, and she just takes up that one tiny bit of space, and Paul Newman takes up the entire rest of the frame because he's pacing back and forward and he's all over the place, and there were some really beautiful moments where if you just sit and watch them, you're like, this is cracking. This is amazing cinema. It's so good to watch. And as you say, it doesn't have to be this over the top kind of struggle or, big shootouts or like crazy chases through, East Berlin or whatever. And there's just so much. The scene that is a spoiler, but there's the scene where Paul Newman's character is walking through the museum and the floor is like checkered. So it's literally like this massive game of chess. And all you hear is like footstep, footstep, silence. Footsteps, and you're like, oh my god, he's been followed. And there's no music. They're just using the floor, and the cinematography is incredible, the sound is incredible, and it's just, I don't know what I was expecting. I kind of thought it was going to be more kitsch, but actually, as you say, Thomas, it's so underplayed. And even Julie Andrews, who apparently Hitchcock didn't like because he just kept expecting her to burst into song, which is a bit of an unfair comment to make, but even her character, she's not like this sort of doe-eyed, oh no, what's going to happen to me? She's quite resilient and quite strong, and I just loved it.
Regarding Joe Andrews there, you're right about that, and she's I think the character's really strong, and her performance is as well. And there's a scene on the plane near the beginning when they're going to East Germany. She's like us, the audience. She seems like the only sane person in the movie at that point. We've no idea what's going on, and neither does she. And she's a good conduit for that because she's just questioning everything like you would do. She's not like, okay, I'm going to slink in the background in the shadows and hey, she's like, what are you doing? What is going on? I am your fiance and you need to tell me these things. What's happening? Why are we in East Germany? And it's not hysterical though. It's a very realistic way you would ask these questions.
Yeah, but also asking those questions in the surroundings that you're in, because obviously East Germany at the time, like a big explosion of emotion would be really noticeable because everything was very, subdued and hush hush. And what I like about her and Michael's characters is often when they're with sort of East German, I don't know what you would call them, like politicians or police or whoever they are. Yeah. There's no German subtitles, so we're in the same boat as them. We're sitting going, have they worked out what's going on? What's happening? But again, it's all through eye contact and just sort of subtle moves of the head, because any sort of outlandish, over-the-top emotion would straight away just mark you as suspicious.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, its portrayal of East Germany at that time is very much a kind of case. It's not this like 1984 over in your face idea. People just go about their days as normal. There's like guys going to work. There's everything's just like how the city was, But there's always that threat of you could just be taken away at any point here in the film, and that really adds to the tension because you've got like Julie Andrews walking about. She's saying she's standing out, and the villains are kind of getting a bit pissed, a bit annoyed with her, and you just keep thinking to yourself, "Women, shush." I don't mean that in a kind of sexist way. I just mean the kind of sense that because she is the only female in the place at this bit, and she stands up for that as well. But like I said, she's a rational, logical person there because she is doing what we're asking, what we want to know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, you're like, this can't end well for you because you shouldn't be acting like this. You could ruin all this.
I imagine for audiences at the time, with Paul Newman being famous for the type of roles that he was, to actually the first opening minutes of this film where you're just like, what the fuck, he's defecting like from this Western lifestyle and everything, or signed to the access that he has, all the secrets that he has in his head. And I think that must have been quite shocking as well, because there was a very real Cold War going on at the time, and to have somebody who's such a American icon of cinema to be playing this defector, I think must have been pretty shocking.
Oh, definitely.
What did you think of the chemistry between the two leads? Now, initially, I thought it was pretty bad. I didn't think that they had any sort of real chemistry whatsoever. But in the context of the movie, it was appropriate because all during the first act, he is trying to distance himself from her. He didn't want her to be on the cruise. He didn't want her to be at the conference. He certainly didn't want her to be on the plane. So in a way, he's almost trying to put her off. Obviously, the opening scene is them under a pile of coats in bed together. And that's quite intimate, and it's one of Hitchcock's trademark extreme close-up kisses, which didn't follow on from Marnie and go down the other side of the face. But yeah, you wouldn't have seen that with Marnie, Thomas. There's a kiss in Marnie where basically Sean Connery works his lips all down one side of Tippi Hedren's face before kissing her, and I thought that just as a sort of an opposite, they would go the other way, or maybe it could go up the way. I don't know, but then censors and all that. I thought there was a lack of chemistry, and initially I put that down to the fact that I thought Julie Andrews was a wee bit miscast in this role, based on the fact that up until that point her popularity was for the likes of The Sound of Music and Mary Poppins. She'd just come off the back of Mary Poppins as well, so therefore she was a big star. Like say Mary, some people were expecting her to actually, chip in with a wee East German ditty with some local children at one point, but but she got better. Yeah, like you say, she was the sort of grounding point for the film. She was the audience proxy, I feel like, and that was kind of brought into focus very well on the plane. There was a beautiful reverse tracking shot which starts at Paul Newman and then it works its way down the aisle past the flight attendant, and then you find out that she's actually on the flight, and that's done really, really well. That was a cracking kind of shot. I really like that. But what did you guys think of the chemistry between them?
Do you know, I didn't really think about it until you mentioned it there, and yeah, I didn't really notice the kind of lack of it. Thinking back about it, you're right. The scenes on the plane and that, and when they first get to East Germany, that it does make sense that there'd be a lack of chemistry because of the way Paul Newman's trying to play his role.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, didn't really bother me because I really liked both characters and their roles. Paul Newman's just great in this. I absolutely loved him. I had great chemistry with Paul Newman in this film. Watching him, yeah, I didn't really notice it. If I even think about it, apart from what you were saying about the kind of lack of it with how we played it. For the tension, yeah, didn't really bother me.
No, I actually completely agree with you, John, and I also wondered if it was down to, but this is just me because I now read sexism into everything that Hitchcock has produced. I actually wondered if it was because the power dynamic was off, because he is the scientist and she is frequently referred to as the assistant.
Yes.
All of this, but not in a complimentary way, in a completely derogatory way. She's referred to as the assistant. So I also wondered if it was something to do with their working relationship or their power dynamic. But you're right, he's trying to basically bugger off and leave her. So that's why he is acting quite, distant towards her. But actually, as the film progressed, I thought, they're quite well matched. She is this, as you say, she's the audience proxy, but as a character, I would say she's quite strong-willed, she's quite resilient, she's quite sharp-talking at times when she needs to be as well. And yeah, I thought they played quite nicely off each other, but I agree, at the beginning, I was kind of like, oh, these two don't really match together, and this is a bit... I see why Hitchcock thought she was miscast, but actually, you're right, it's all part of the bigger plot.
I did think that at the beginning as well, but you just right at the beginning, and especially when not long into the film, it's telling you she's the assistant, and I'm thinking, is that appropriate? It's actually appropriate. That's the first thing I thought of. And I was surprised as the film went on to how strong the relationship was, because for me it was setting it up as a fling more than lovers to that degree. But yeah, overall, it didn't really bother me. But did you know Julie Andrews is an Aquaman?
Yes. Yeah, I knew that, yeah.
I haven't seen as what?
She does a voice of underwater god.
I thought you were going to say a fish or something. I don't know why, and I was like, "What the fuck?"
Not far off, really.
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah.
Style monster. It was the last time I watched it. I realised I'm in the credits. I was like, "What the fuck?" That's a bit mental.
She's not made enough money at Mary Poppins and the Sound of Music. Is she doing a Michael Caine? She's got another house to pay for or something, or
the fact that I love the fact she's still working. She's got a film coming out next year.
She's got a series coming on to Netflix on Christmas Day. Bridgerton. It's almost like Gossip Girl meets Pride and Prejudice, and she's sort of doing the narration.
I love that.
Well, that's the Shonda Rhimes thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
First thing in her big deal. That's right. Yeah, I remember reading about that. Okay, back to the movie. Now, no, not at all. As always with Hitchcock films, there are a number of very interesting supporting characters. Now, the sort of main supporting character in this one is the East German guard, Gromek, who on the face of it is a bit of a buffoon to begin with, because he says really rather stupid things, for want of another phrase, about it really made me laugh, because he talked about a pizza parlor on 88th Street in New York. Do you know it? And that's the kind of thing that you get if you ever go somewhere on holiday that's reasonably far away from Scotland. If you ever go to Australia, which I have been to, and I did actually get asked this question when I was in Australia. Oh, you're from Scotland? You must know Jean from Kirkcaldy. Which is that kind of question. So on the face of it, he was a bit of a buffoon, but he more than proved his worth as a bad guy in the way that he was able to track Michael when he tried to give him the slip. Now, part of that is down to the fact that Michael was a rubbish spy, because if you're going to walk through a big tiled museum come art gallery, you're going to wear rubber-soled shoes, because rather than something with segs in it. And then obviously he tracked him down to where he was going to, and obviously I would like to speak about what happens after that now, but that character itself I thought was a particularly good one, because he was quite surprising in a way. He wasn't as straightforward as you were initially led to believe. He was introduced with another character who had a big scar just above his eye, and you thought these were just going to be typical Eastern European goons, but he did not turn out to be that way at all.
No, and for me, I thought the buffoonery was an act. I thought everything was just, again, I kind of thought, like, almost the reverse. He thought they were stupid Americans, so he put on this kind of buffoonish act, but actually in scenes that follow, when he talks about, you know, I went to night school and all this stuff, you realise this guy is fucking laser sharp, and you could literally bury yourself in the earth somewhere and he would find you. Like, I felt like this, they're presented again in the black leather jackets and all that sort of thing, they're presented as these kind of oafish characters, but actually very, very clever and very and much more astute than, as you say, Paul Newman, because he's a bit of a rubbish spy.
Which is fine, because
he's a scientist.
Yeah, I think it's like he's not supposed to be this James Bond style super spy who's really tough, and that makes it work for the movie. As we've mentioned earlier, where the lack of the action makes it more tense, rather than it being this spectacle of a movie.
So obviously, following on. Oh, sorry, did you have something else?
No, just it's quite thrilling in that aspect.
Yep. You touched on the fact that the thrills are all very subdued. Now, there is a scene in the middle of the film where Gromek has tracked Michael down to a farmhouse, and Michael's meeting up with the character there as well, the guy in the tractor.
That was cracking.
With the big moustache and it was like a Texas accent or something like that. It was something quite bizarre that you wouldn't hear in East Germany whatsoever. But anyway, we go past that. Gromit finds him, basically works out without much problem, works out that he is actually a spy because he's written pie in in the dirt outside the house and then not rubbed it out. You know, spycraft, mate. Come on, basic
I think that's like first class, the first class that you go to in spy school. You know, rub out the messages you've left behind. But he obviously must have missed that day.
Yeah. I'm surprised he didn't take the toilet paper that he wrote down the initial word on with him. Just, I'll keep this in my pocket in case I forget it later on. You know, I'm only a scientist. I remember things, but I won't remember that. So anyway, there's a confrontation scene where Gromit figures out Michael is a spy, and a struggle ensues. And Michael and the woman who is actually living in the farmhouse basically murder this guy, and it's horrific. Yeah. It's done without any sound. It takes about 3-4 minutes in order to do the scene. The woman uses pretty much everything that's to hand in order to attack him. She throws a pot at him. She stabs him with a very poorly made East German knife, which snaps off. And then, as the pièce de résistance, they stick his head in the oven and gas him. Now, this was a horrible scene. This was absolutely horrible. I could see why they did it that way, because Michael's a scientist. He doesn't know how to kill somebody. The woman, although she's part of this secret spy organization, which they mention it again and again, they're not a political organization. They're not a violent organization. So she won't know how to do it either. So therefore, it's clumsy. Everything that everything that happens, and it really obviously takes a toll on both of them. Now, I was completely horrified by this. It's so unexpected in a film like this.
Yeah, I was sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I read that Hitchcock wanted to, apparently he was really sickened by like spy films where you can kill someone in like 2 seconds just by like, you know, pushing your elbow down on their throat, and he wanted to show that actually murdering someone is very difficult, especially if you don't know what you're doing, and it's grubby and it's messy and it takes time. And as you say, John, see when they finally just dragged his body over and she turned those taps on, I was like, okay, this is a bit much. This is getting a bit, and they just shove his head right. I was like, this is, I mean, she's taking a bloody shovel to his knees and you see them snap backwards and you're just like, is this going to stop? Because the thing is, Gromit, obviously, I don't know what kind of training the Stasi went through, but he seems game for them. You know, he's bigger than Paul Newman and this woman put together. So, you know, she stabbed him in the collarbone, but as you say, the poor craftsmanship means the knife snaps off, and he just sort of shrugs them back off, and he's ready to fight again. It is so. I don't know, the word cringy isn't what I'm looking for, but do you know what I mean? Like, you can't quite look at it, but you can't stop looking at it, and it's messy and it's dirty and it's just, I mean, a stunning bit of, like, you know, choreography and everything that went into it, but really difficult to watch.
Yeah, and just saying, it's like Michael doesn't have a clue how to kill anybody. He's not some James Bond super spy. He's just a scientist that's trying to help his country. But it's been he grabbed Gromit, and Gromit's like, yeah, you made a mistake here, because I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to kill everybody because I am a really good spy. And then he just tries out. But this shovel scene, it's like she hits him with the shovel, but he doesn't fall down. She just hits him again. You're like, oh my god! And then he's a villain, and that's what makes it even worse, because you're watching this and you watch all these other films and like the bad guys getting killed and that, and you're cheering. With this, you're like, oh, just please put him out his misery.
I know, you're like, make it stop. I know, either just let him walk away, or, you know, not that he could walk away with his broken kneecaps, but just like either finish it or don't. Yeah.
You're at no point in rooting for him, but you're like, you feel sorry for him. Like, he doesn't deserve this. And it's surprisingly, it's not a gory scene or anything, but it's graphic in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
It's graphic about being exploitative in a strange way. It's not got this exaggerated gore or anything. It's just really drawn out, and it makes sense, the fact that it wants to show how difficult it is to kill someone. Well, it certainly does that.
Yeah.
And even when they do kill them, they kind of look at each other and they're kind of exhausted, and you see the look of regret in their face. They're like, we've just killed somebody. Even though it was a fight for a life, it's not kind of, yes, you've killed somebody, now I'm going to have a cigarette. You know, it's it's a very sobering scene.
Yeah, totally. Going back to the sympathies that you just mentioned there was a scene which was actually cut from the film, which had Michael visiting a factory later on in the film. It's just before he went on the run. And in the factory was Gromek's older brother, which was played by the same character except with grey hair and glasses. And this character talks about his brother in sort of very flowery terms and what a nice guy, showing photos of his family, showing that Gromek had children and all this sort of stuff. But then they had to cut that scene because it made Michael look like a really bad guy then. All the sympathies went to the guy that he murdered rather than him, because when you actually look at his reasons for doing everything, it's to get secret plans for a rocket. It's not like really a noble undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
It's to further the American nuclear arms race, if you like, rather than anything else. It's one-upmanship. He's not doing it for any sort of national reasons that you could sort of say, yeah, well, it was probably justified. It's not really. It's just this, the nuclear option that both countries were chasing at that time. So it would have shifted the audience away from actually rooting for Michael as a character, and probably you would probably be looking at his assistant then saying, well, why the hell is she with him in that sort of instance? So it didn't really sort of sit with the rest of the movie, so therefore they chucked it out, so you would still be quite happy following the Imperial American in his pursuit of lies. So there were a number of Hitchcock elements in this film. You could watch this film without knowing it was an Alfred Hitchcock film, or being told it was an Alfred Hitchcock film, and really within maybe about 15-20 minutes you would say, yep, I know who directed this. What did you think of those sort of elements? I'm thinking here in terms of the scenery, and obviously there was the likes of the music and all that, as well as the acting itself. What did you think about those various elements of the movie?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, it's, as you say, it was the same as Saboteur as well. You can watch a Hitchcock film and you just know it's a Hitchcock film. And what makes it interesting with this as well is that Paul Newman did clash with Hitchcock regarding it, because he came from a different generation of actors that weren't of Hitchcock's. Well, Hitchcock had a certain generation of actors, and Paul Newman didn't fit that mould. So they clashed quite a lot on set. I think Paul Newman didn't dislike Hitchcock, but Hitchcock thought Paul Newman was being quite disrespectful with the question he was asking. And one of the questions they asked, like, what's my motivation for the character? And they replied, your salary.
That's a totally Hitchcock response. There's the famous quote about Castle and stuff like that. I think he wanted Cary Grant to play the role of Michael, but Cary Grant said he was too old and he'd retired and stuff like that. But, I mean, you can see Paul Newman being a wee bit more, as you say, of a challenge, that new kind of generation, and maybe not just saying like Cary Grant was like, yes, sir, please, sir, thank you so much, sir. Like, I don't think he was ever like that either, but yeah, probably more a wee bit kind of wild and a wee bit more of a challenge, I guess.
Yeah, and the reason I mentioned that, you were saying, John, that we kind of diverge too much, but there is these Hitchcock-isms in the film, but there's also this new cinema feel in regards to the actor, especially the lead actor, Paul Newman, because he has tried to bring something different.
Yeah,
as the film is evolving through the years.
Yeah, there was obviously the Hitchcock scene itself, where he has his usual cameo, and normally you have to kind of look out for it, but in this one, Hitchcock was sitting in the lobby of the hotel with a child on him, and when the camera went onto that scene, the film music composer actually put in a bit of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents music, just to emphasize the fact that look there, he's there, which I thought was awful. I thought that was absolutely dreadful, which kind of moves me on to the music itself, because I didn't like the music in this film whatsoever. I thought it was intrusive in the way that it was used. And it was overly melodramatic as well for the type of film it was. This was meant to be a Cold War thriller, and yet you had scenes, especially the scene that you mentioned earlier, where two main characters having a conversation in a room, and the Julie Andrews character is static in one corner of it, and Paul Newman character's moving about. Now, there was this swirling music going on, and it so detracted from the film. It was just so didn't seem to work. I mean, this is a film composer that's won Oscars and everything. It's not just somebody they brought in last minute, somebody that knows what they're doing, but it just didn't seem to work for me whatsoever. It didn't have the sort of required tension to it. It didn't complement the scenes. It kind of intruded in the scenes as far as I was concerned.
Yeah, and there's a kind of similar scene where Paul Newman takes Julie Andrews, like a few meters away from the bad guys, and yet they can't hear a word they're saying. And she goes, it's bizarre because it really stands out from the rest of the film, because she goes into like soft focus and she does become really doughy-eyed, and there's tears, and the music again is this kind of over the top, sort of like you would think you're watching a romance movie. And that scene in particular kind of stuck in my throat, and I was like, huh? Is this DVD swapped to something? Like, what the fuck am I watching? Because it just didn't fit in. But I actually felt there was a number of inconsistencies. So there's the scene where Paul Newman's on the nurse's bed and he sort of flips round and the shirt's open and he's almost like posing. I was like, again, this is weird. And then there's the character that comes in right at the very end, the Polish countess, and she's like dressed in feathers and she's over the top and she's really colourful and she tells this ludicrous over the top story and just starts bawling her eyes out crying. And there was a few kind of moments in this film, and the Hitchcock appearance is part of that, where they just kind of, I was like, huh? Because it didn't make, for a movie that I totally loved and really, really enjoyed, those are the kind of four main bits that I just thought, this is weird and doesn't make sense to the rest of the movie. It was quite, inconsistent,
Yeah, the subplot with the Countess I thought was strange because it didn't really go anywhere. And it was very unsatisfying and unresolved. Overly dramatic character to not have any resolution with. It was just kind of like, well, did we really need that scene?
Yeah, I didn't get it at all, because she was looking for a way out of East Germany. She's looking for a sponsor, and she was saying, well, you could sponsor me, except he's a wanted criminal in East Germany, so he's not exactly... The East German authorities are going to go, oh yeah, I know who this guy is, he's a spy, but if he's sponsoring her...
There's a way that she does help him kind of escape, and she's crying as she realises she's going to be stuck in East Germany. And I'm like, I feel sorry for this character now who just came in the film 5 minutes ago. And we're going to get in, we're going to go back to it at the point, oh no, we're not. So she's just trapped there. There was no point to it. And you kind of mentioned the soft focus aspects in that. It was almost like Hitchcock, to go back to your point, John, kept trying to get his shit in a way. It was like, right, I want to put in my trademarks. It's not working in the film.
Yeah.
So I'm Hitchcock. I am known for doing stuff like this. I'm going to make sure it's in the film. And if you shoehorn and bits in, as you're saying, Mary, as well, it makes it quite jarring in an inconsistent way, unfortunately. This film, as much as I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was great, it could have done with some editing that cut the runtime down and took all that stuff out. That just didn't work.
Yeah, there's a few wee bits that I thought were not... There was a kind of a lack of consistency. If you think about it, when they went to East Germany on the plane, it was a very last minute thing, and yet Julie Andrews seemed to have about 17 different outfits to wear while she was there, and Paul Newman had a couple of different suits and all that. I'm not saying they weren't nice. It was obviously Edith Head that did all the costumes, which was great, but I thought it was particularly telling when they were about to make, or try to make, their escape. And they were told, meet us at 10 o'clock, no baggage. And I thought, well, that's probably just as well, because they would need a second bus just for all the baggage that they were going to have to bring with them. I cannot go any further without mentioning Julie Andrews' hair. What the fuck was that all about? That was like it was like a granny perm. What was that?
It actually looks worse than Gillian Anderson playing Maggie Thatcher in The Crown just now. It's fucking like they did her dirty on that. It is rotten. But again, like this, like it was almost like they were making her sort of like mumsy, because even the costumes were like, they were like olive green or grey, and I get that they were maybe trying to blend into East Berlin, but they made her look really like granny-ish. And and Paul Newman sitting there with the shirt open at the nurse's table, as I said, like totally, and I'm like, it was bizarre. But I I did really enjoy this film, and as I say, I absolutely loved it. And there were so many moments where I totally held my breath. But now that we're talking about it, I'm like, there's so much stuff in it. It's totally fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. 'Cause I did notice it when I was watching the film, and I'm watching it going, it's Paul Newman and Julie Andrews, and Julie Andrews is obviously one of the leads in this movie. But it's quite central bizarre. Even I seen her hair, I'm thinking, I don't think she's going to be in this film for much longer because I can't see that haircut surviving the 2-hour runtime. It's a very bizarre thing to say, but that's how noticeable it was.
No, there was a bit where it was when she was in East Germany and she was obviously on her own in her hotel room, and there was a knock at the door, and she always, just a moment, please, and goes and puts on this beautiful long dressing gown, and then sort of tries to do something with her hair, and you go, nah, it's not going to cut it, love. I'm sorry, that's you'll need a wee bit more time.
But yeah, you mentioned that the. you mentioned the granny parent type idea, and you're like, how old is she supposed to be in this film?
Yeah, I know.
You can cast it with Paul Newman, who is so sharp looking. He looks like a catalogue.
And the thing is, her costumes are beautiful, apart from the colours, which are very, very drab. Like, her costumes are beautiful. But yeah, like, did Hitchcock just really not like her and went, see that fucking wig, get that stuck on her, that's her punishment?
That's what it feels like, doesn't it? It almost feels like he's been a dick. Mm-hmm. And it's like, people are just going to think of you as the musical star. I'm going to show them.
I don't know if it was to show that she was like, I'm using the word dowdy and I feel really bad for doing it, but I don't know if it was because she was meant to be like, I know she was the assistant, but she was clearly like, she knew her stuff about the scientific side of things. I don't know if it was to show that she was a scientist and therefore unbothered about her appearance. I don't know.
I actually think it was because he didn't want her in the role. Because if you think about some of the other main Hitchcock female leads, they're like, for instance, Marnie was a thief, and she's supposed to just blend into the background and be a sort of nobody. But at no point during that film is her character anything other than glamorous, no matter what hair colour she's got, what clothes she's wearing, So yeah, I do think it was probably deliberate, unfortunately.
I missed the last podcast. We were talking about Hitchcock, and I've seen my fair share of Hitchcock movies, just not that box set. Rear Window, love. Psycho's one of my favourite films ever. Big fan of Vertigo. Eventually, didn't like it the first time. Second time, blew me away. But doing the research for this podcast for these two movies, Hitchcock had issues with the cast in both films. Is this a common theme he has in his movies where he doesn't like who he casts?
So he had an issue. He blamed the lack of commercial success of Vertigo on Jimmy Stewart being too old for Kim Novak. But actually, do you know what I'm just thinking, John? There's the character of Midge, again, who's like the plain friend with the bad hair in Vertigo as well. And this is why I'm like, is it just to signify that she's not? I know she's meant to be his love interest, but she's never. It's not a romantic relationship. It's a scientific relationship, and they're on the run together. Is that why she's plain looking? Because again, when I was watching it, her costumes, for all that they were very beautifully crafted, she was blended into the brutalist architecture in the background because everything was so grey and drab. And I thought, is it just because she's a scientist, or as you say, is it just Hitchcock absolutely doing her dirty because he didn't like her?
I genuinely think it is the latter. I think he's going to go. It's strange.
Well, apparently she was very expensive, so I don't know if it was like, well, you were so expensive, there's no money left for wigs.
There's actually a website I found with people discussing the haircut in this movie. I'll send you the link.
Tremendous.
It's on the website. She's barely turned 30 in this movie. She's got the haircut of a 70-year-old woman.
I was going to say, there's wee grannies cutting about Glasgow with more modern haircuts.
Yes, and leopard print as well. But yes, let's not go too far into that.
The grannies in Glasgow are about 20.
Yeah. So, in keeping with the sort of the themes of the film and everything being sort of downplayed, the finale was kind of downplayed. It started with them taking to bicycles. And which was also a very easy escape from a building which apparently had been locked down. They basically just had to go down another set of stairs and then hop on 3 bicycles that just happened to be there. And then it was obviously a bicycle, and then it was a bus, and the greatest tension in the whole sort of bus scene, which maybe about 15 minutes, I think they were on this bus, was the fact that there was another bus catching up to them.
I actually thought that was a dig at, like, do you know how they always say like German public transport is really efficient and runs on time? I was wondering if they were trying to like sort of poke a joke at that or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I actually thought the finale was really. I mean, thought it was quite tense. I thought, you know, you go to but I get what you're saying. It's slightly ridiculous. Yeah.
I'm not saying that it wasn't good. I'm just saying it was a complete contrast to the likes of Saboteur, where it was very short, as Thomas mentioned earlier, and it was very dramatic because it was short. There was no music. It was set somewhere very recognisable, whereas this was it was slightly more meandering. It took longer. There was people having an argument on the bus at one point, for instance, and there was use of twins on the bus as well. There was two blonde East Germans, which kind of mirrors Saboteur, where there was the twins in the circus caravan as well, which I thought was a nice wee nod between both of the films. He seems to like having these sort of elements, and then even big finale in the theatre and going on from there. It was all quite subdued. It wasn't overplayed in any way. All we needed to do was shout fire, and then everything could happen. A wee side note from that: obviously there was a ballet performance on that. That was actually designed by the same person who designed the ballet performance for The Red Shoes as well. So you could kind of see that in the way that it was set out and the way that it was staged and all that as well. But yes, it was a lower key final act. The final act was quite long. It was about 45 minutes long as well. But it worked in terms of the overall film because, like I've noted a couple of times, he wasn't a professional spy. This wasn't, the jet boat waiting for them, sitting in the river to whisk them away. It was very sort of low key. It was all done on the hoof almost.
Yeah, you don't get many spies having to get the bus to escape.
No, on the number 6 into town. No, I mean, I actually thought it was to show, like, again, I thought it was to show how difficult it was to get out of that country. It literally was like planes, trains, and automobiles just trying to get out. And every stage that they went through seemed to be foiled. And you were like, fuck, are they ever going to get out of there? Like, this is so difficult. And again, I think it was to show that for lots of ordinary people who obviously were trying to make the escape, inside car seats and all the rest of it, like, it was really, really hard. Like, there was no concrete way of getting out of there that wasn't, going to be foiled at the last minute. And I did like that kind of element of it as well.
Definitely, and this idea is like they're not in some post-apocalyptic war zone where there's like soldiers, there's soldiers, machine guns, like kind of in the streets and stuff. They're not like they're in constant danger, but there's also people going about their lives normally. The buses still run. People go to their work and go to the ballet. It's like they're under communist rule, but it's done in a very realistic way, and especially for the time the movie came out. I'm surprised maybe didn't get more criticism for the fact that it wasn't more critical of life under that regime.
There was no caricatures of like people getting rounded up in the streets or something like that. But at the same time, as you noted earlier on, Sammy, there is this kind of underlying threat of you kind of feel like anyone could be taken away any time, and actually any other person that they meet, you're like, can you trust them, or are they a double agent? Or like, so I do think that it maybe doesn't need the caricatures, and the stereotypes, because there is this the whole way through it. I just felt very tense and felt like you couldn't actually trust anyone. So maybe it doesn't need that. But you're right. I think for an American audience, I think they would have almost expected to see how terrible life was in East Berlin. I don't know why I did the inverted commas, it was terrible. But I think they were maybe expecting to see that, and you're right, there's a complete lack of it.
Yep, totally.
A finale where the bus drives through the wall. In the background. Michael Bay's remake of Torn Curtain.
There was a small element of the ballet scene which I thought was Hitchcock not really trusting the audience, because the ballerina who had featured previously on the plane into East Germany noticed him in the audience, and that was telegraphed to the cinema audience by showing it 3 times. Her turning around and looking, doing a twirl and looking at him, and then again and again and again, and then it was like, and then the eyes, she has her hands over her eyes, and she, I know who this is, you know, and you're kind of going, well, if you'd been following the story, which everybody was, then you would know that she was a character from before and she recognised them. It was clumsy, I would say, and it was quite unusual for Hitchcock, I thought. He doesn't usually do those sort of things, but was a lack of faith in the story itself, because I know they went into production with the story not finished to his satisfaction, or I'm not quite sure what, but it seemed a wee bit out of place for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think they rewrote the ending a couple of times. I know that he still, even when it went to cinema, he wasn't happy with how it ended. But yeah, that was really, I mean, she just looked like just like a pure cow as well. To be honest with you, I didn't need like 3 massive close-ups of her face as well. But actually, it was like, I don't know if it was trying to be sort of, I don't know what the word is. I don't know if he was trying to like do something really different in his movie. But again, it's one of those moments that again sort of stands out as being like inconsistent with the rest of this fairly, not standard spy thriller, because I think that's doing it a disservice, but what I mean is like all the rest of the tropes are there, whereas this sticks out as being something as like, oh, odd.
Yeah, it is strange, and we mentioned that earlier as well. He does seem to be putting stuff in almost for the sake of his enjoyment.
Yeah.
At the expense of the film itself. Hitchcock's just sitting there dissecting one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, telling him it's done wrong. Well, this film wasn't very well received when it came out either. It's it was heavily criticised. I don't even think it's that much of a. I don't think retrospectively people are big fans of it. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's one of those films where passage of time has been kind to, and people look back at it differently now. I don't think it's one of his most popular works.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I certainly hadn't seen it up until now. Don't get me wrong, I absolutely bloody loved it. And I was like, oh, it's a shame that it's taken me so long to see this. But, now that I was making notes and I was talking about it, there are moments that jump out as being very, very odd and not in keeping with the rest of it. But I would say that it's one of the, out of the 4 that we've watched so far, I would say that I really have enjoyed this. Maybe not the most, but I think it was a really excellent watch.
Yep. So you would recommend it then?
Definitely. I think that, it's funny because obviously John le Carré died last week, and I was thinking about, Tinker Tailor, Soldier Spy, and the remake of that, and, the Spy That Came In From the Cold, and all those kind of real classics. And to me, this kind of, okay, there's some elements of it that kind of make you laugh and seem a bit odd, but I think that's up there with one of those kind of classic spy thrillers. It's got a good, strong cast, excellent storyline. It shows the difficulties of what it's actually like to be on the run or to murder someone or to try and escape from somewhere. And it doesn't sugarcoat all of these facts that things were, messy and difficult, and, politics was very, charged at that particular moment in time as well. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, luckily we don't live in that sort of environment now where we have charged politics. So, Thomas, would you recommend this movie?
I would, yeah. I really enjoyed it. I did think, as much as I enjoyed the climax, it did drag a little. There's a lot of these subplots kind of thrown in what could have did without, in my opinion. And it was at the tension. I thought it was a great level of tension for how it was played out. I would recommend it, yeah. And I thought the leads were both very good. Their chemistry, yeah, as you were saying, I didn't really notice the lack of it, but I don't disagree with you, either of you, regarding it. But I think we'll both have very good performances, and I think it's a very good film.
Nice, yeah, I would agree with both of you. It's a pretty enjoyable film. It did have its moments where we took it to bits somewhat. I think when you look at these films, and if you're concentrating on the small things about them, like the hairstyles and some of the reasons, like the soft focus and all this sort of stuff, because you're concentrating on those things, it's actually complementary, because you're saying the main themes and the main drive of the story are all really sound. So therefore you're putting that to one side, and therefore you're concentrating on the wee things. It is a compliment in a way. I know it doesn't sound like it sometimes when critics talk about films, but if you talk about the minutiae of films rather than the overall themes, then they've usually done something right.
Yeah, and I feel like with Hitchcock, like you're in safe hands. Do you know what I mean? Like the themes are going to be, fairly straightforward. There's going to be certain patterns that you're going to pick up on. So yeah, you can trust the story and let that unfold. And as you say, that's when you start to pick up on the smaller stuff.
Excellent. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen of our audience. I'm assuming that a lady actually listens to us.
Probably not anymore after my women shush comment.
Probably not, no. So if you have any thoughts on the two films that we have discussed today, please get in touch with us. You can find us at all the normal social media channels, and you can send us an email at podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. First time, Mary. First time. Got it right first time. So please do let us know what you think. And if you have any comments or any ideas about other Hitchcock pairings that we can look at, we do have a list, but we are quite happy to amend that or adjust it as we go along. Well, Mary's saying no because she made up the list. So please scratch that last comment. So once again, thank you very much for listening to the Moviescramble podcast. We shall see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.